when the presentation is finished. Now, as more EV drivers join our roads, they don't necessarily need more charge points. What they need is more reliable charging. There are regulations coming into force in the UK and Europe that are intended to drive this. But in a competitive market, it's up to CPOs to go further. If a driver arrives at an out-of-service charge point, the charge point operator is who's going to stick in mind and not for the right reasons. To explain how businesses can ensure the best possible charging experience for EV drivers, we're joined by Brad Sandys from Techniche EV and Michael Gibson from Fuse. Michael is the CEO of Fuse, which provides an all-in-one command center for CPOs to control and manage their EV charge points. And Brad is head of business development in the EMEA region at Techniche EV. He can speak to the importance of integrating and automating maintenance processes with charge point operations. They're going to discuss the current landscape for EV charging, the way that customer experience will increasingly set apart the best CPOs, and the key challenges in the space. To kick things off, we've got a poll question. We'd love to know what your biggest challenge today is as a CPO. While that poll runs, Brad, I'm going to hand over to you to speak a bit more about why you and Michael are here today.
I was just submitting my work myself. So yeah, thank you for having us, Molly, and thanks for the introduction. And it's great to have Michael from Fuse joining us. So I suppose the question is, why Techniche and Fuse together on this podcast? Well, we've entered into a strategic technical partnership as we've got complementary solutions that, when integrated, can be really powerful for a CPO to improve their efficiency and ultimately deliver better network reliability, which we'll go into in more detail. So that's kind of why we're here together, and I think we've got a compelling offer. And then, right, might as well jump in. So actually, should we address the poll first of all to see what we've got coming in? So what's your biggest challenge today as a CPO? Looks like driver knowledge and behavior is number one at the moment, and also ROI. And there could be a number of different factors that are affecting the ROI, profitability, getting the utilization up, maintenance costs. So I can understand why CPOs are having problems with this. Michael, was there any surprises in there for you?
Not really. I mean, I think there's a real mix, inevitably, and they all lead to the same kind of issues, I think, fundamentally, in terms of optimization and affecting and improving utilization of your charge points, and ultimately, at the end of the day, profitability.
It does seem like the outlier is driver knowledge and behavior, which I know you've got some points to touch on later on in a bit. But yeah, interesting to see what people are having issues with. Why don't we jump forward into your slide, talking about the landscape?
Yeah, one thing that really sums this up is that we're definitely in the second wave of EV and EV charging now. What was originally a process of putting assets into the ground and understanding how they worked and how the industry and how people engage with chargers has really shifted, and we're very much into a kind of data-driven era where we look at the things that performance indicators and the things that sit beneath all that and drive margin, profitability, utilization, and filling the empty space, really, when chargers aren't being used, and how that demand cycle grows. I think some of the points in here, it's almost like we should be mentioning them in some ways, because we are EV is really powering forward. But the first quarter of this year saw a 40% growth in electric vehicle sales in the UK, which is a phenomenal rate of growth, and has really reached an inflection point that's very common in Europe now across places like Norway and Denmark, where you've seen 50% or more of all electric vehicle sales being EVs. And that's then reflected obviously in the growth in the charging network as well, where we're now over 1 million charge points across Europe, over 80,000 in the UK, and various surveys like the IEA recently have seen that you either need in the UK driving a threefold increase in the UK according to government to reach 300,000 public chargers, but an indication with the IEA saying about 10-time growth as well. So we do need this, and we will continue to do it. But underpinning it is all these various issues that we need to see improvements in. With CPOs, obviously, one of the big things we really noticed at Fuse is the continuing growth in the requirement for rapid hubs. What was originally the odd 50 kilowatt charger in a car park somewhere has been really overtaken by much more of a forecourt style experience, really, with connected secondary revenues and significant amounts of chargers in one location. And then the behavioral driver behavior, actually driving on regular routes, identifying places where they regularly go and charge, very much in a similar way to how vehicle drivers these days use motorway service stations they prefer or where they need to stop. And what needs to change for CPOs? I mean, there's so many things that could affect the metrics for CPOs, obviously faster EV adoption, but higher utilization, and obviously management. The one big thing that we're here all here to talk about is which is reliability. And reliability and the failure of reliability means that drivers take the view that this isn't the place for them to charge or they won't return. And embedding high quality reliability into your offer is absolutely critical as we go forward.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. The reliability is definitely a problem that needs to be tackled and addressed for the market to continue to grow. Just moving on from that a touch, I'm fortunate enough to get to see quite a few conferences and insights from various people talking about landscape of EV driving and kind of what's coming up. And I'm going to steal with pride here from a consultant from Oliver Wyman I saw speak at the NACS conference in Copenhagen a couple of weeks ago. And what Eloise was talking about was the reasons why drivers select sites. So this was based off a survey that went to 5,000 EV drivers globally, and they were given a list of things they could choose that would determine why they would choose a location. And these are the answers that came in the top 3 of those respondents. Charging speed, making sure that they're actually getting the speed that they believe they can get, believe being the ultimate word there. What are the amenities that are around the charger? Does it match the consumer driver mission that they've got at that time? Should it be fast charging if they're in on the way to somewhere, or is it going to be slower would suit because they're at the work or somewhere else for a longer period of time? The availability of the chargers and ultimately price as well. But if you look at the flip side of that, the things that drivers are complaining about when they get to these sites is the charge speeds aren't what they're expecting. They are having issues with the availability of chargers, or if they are broken, and potentially they are expensive. I mean, I only had to compare the pricing of public fast charging in Denmark, which was half the price of the UK. So you can see why there's going to be some frustrations with customers at the moment. And EV drivers are sensitive, right? So if you've in fact impacted their ability to get to their destination, they're probably not going to return, and that will ultimately affect the CPO's brand reputation. They'll tell their friends about it. So it's this spiraling effect. So these are definitely things CPOs need to address for customers to have a better experience and be more confident in the infrastructure kind of going forward. And then Mike, what do you think on the challenge?
Yeah, I just picked up on some of those themes really, and to try and understand a little bit more about what's those key challenges are for CPOs. And I think obviously a lot of the things that you lend itself there to improving the customer experience for the driver. Fundamentally, if the chargers are reliable and working, that's going to be a key tick box for them. But people are habitual. They like to come back to what they know, what they like, and what provides them with a great experience. And that could be some on-site amenities that give the kids the room to go and take a break and grab some food or whatever it may be while they're on a longer journey, that ties into that classic service station experience. Or and that whole element of it is continuing to be key. And obviously good pieces of industry research like one we've seen before gives some of those points. Growing your customer base. I think CPOs are increasingly looking about how they can fill that white space, the empty periods where nobody's charging. And I think obviously that involves things like connection to fleet, looking at variable pricing and looking at initiatives that will bring drivers to charging sites out of peak hours, and continue to spread that and improve those gaps. I think that one of the things is that everybody recognises in charging is there's lots of points of failure, and if you look at what is quite a complex ecosystem, we have challenges around ultimately the charger itself, how it works, how that performs, and how we can make that optimal. And the driver, and we've talked about that already, the driver behaviour behind all this is a really key issue. We offer in-house 24/7, 365 driver support. And the one thing that we notice is that 80% of the issues that we resolve at chargers can be resolved without us having to do anything. So fundamentally, it's a driver behaviour issue. And as more and more drivers switch to EV, these issues are going to remain common while people learn and experience. And that could simply be, other things that are on site, that signage, information that's given to them, and how clear that is, and how easy it is to basically navigate while their charging experience. And there's other elements of all that as well. Of course, there's the vehicle itself, and vehicles and how they interact with chargers is quite an interesting thing, as we all, as software providers, we know well. There's the payment terminals, communications, as I mentioned, signage. These things are really important in terms of the whole ecosystem of how you can improve reliability, and you can't just simply look at one thing on its own. There's so much to do. And I think, and I've said data, and more data. The more we learn from this, how we can drive things forward. And I think we've got some really good insight and some examples about how data can do this, both with ourselves and Techniche, about how data can be gathered, collected, inspected, interpreted, and how we can really use that to drive improvements consistently as we go along. And yeah, I mean, back to that, I've said improve customer experience to start. I'm going to say it again. Drivers are looking for the things that are going to make their experience a really fulfilling one, and make sure that on those regular, that for behaviourally, it's a site and a brand as a CPO that you continue to return to.
You've got a lot of points there, but it sounds like CPOs have it pretty tough. And I also liked your point about driver behaviour. Clearly is an issue, right? Because CPOs, they have to deal with the public, and the public can have a massive effect on infrastructure, whether that be accidental damage or malicious damage. These are things that can impact and give the CPO something to do. That could be broken screens or connectors. We know that this is a new technology, and there's lots of integrations in place. So it only takes some sort of issue to happen with the payment reader, or your SIM connection to drop out. All of those things are going to mount as problems for the CPO, and the customer won't see that. They'll just see that as the charger's not working and they're annoyed. But then you also get public behaviour. So might there be bay blocking and stopping other customers from potentially charging. We've got a customer in the Nordics at the moment which is facing quite a lot of issues with cable theft. You wouldn't think that in such a nice part of the world in Denmark, but it's happening, and we need good processes and structures in place to be able to mitigate those problems when they happen, because drivers, when they have bad experiences, are much more likely to tell their friends, their family about it, which ultimately impacts that brand reputation. And this is all happening at a time where we're still quite early on in the charging infrastructure place. So there's actually not there's 1 million chargers across Europe, but that's still relatively small compared to where we need to get to in 2030. Chargers are fairly new, so wear and tear isn't that high because utilization isn't particularly high yet. And driver behavior, if we're having a problem with it at the moment, it's usually the early adopters are quite tech savvy, so they're up for trying new things. And if they're getting it wrong, when every person on the road is going to be driving an EV, then it really needs to be clear for these people. Because if you jump forward 5-10 years, all of these problems are just going to escalate. And if CPOs are relying on their network service teams, it puts a lot of pressure on them, and they can only fix as many problems as they can fix at a time themselves. So it really does need structure and integrations in place to allow them to scale confidently and have good network reliability for the future. So yeah, Michael, tell us a little bit about Fuse.
Yeah, I'd keep it short. I'm obviously people want to hear about the key things, but I mean, probably people on the call will know Fuse is a highly flexible charge point management system, principally offered as a white label solution for CPOs, but also as a fully headless API driven solution. So we fully integrate into existing systems. I wanted to make the point really about Fuse and reliability, and and the fact is it involves 2 or 3 different things really. And I think that's, first of all, there's quality of the technology, and the software has to be robust and solid, and we're one of only 2 European-based charge point management systems to be fully OCPP certified by the Open Charge Alliance, so for both 1.6 and 2.0.1. And but that has to be allied to good people, and I think one of the things that really makes a difference with us is battle hardened people who've been around the industry now for a considerable amount of time, who know where the issues arise and could identify those things that, okay, data tells us a phenomenal amount and we have a phenomenal amount of data, but what we're able to do is then also get to the root of the problem quickly, and that's having that exceptional experience of a team to be able to drive that, and obviously something we're really proud of. What we're doing, and we're continuing to develop, and I think obviously any good charge point management system would say the same, is that we have to use all this information at our disposal. And actually, as it's grown and the industry's grown, and that quality and volume of data, we're now really starting to understand and see those intricacies of the things that are affecting the charging experience and being able to act. And I think what's really important, particularly from the side of asset management, which is where Techniche come in, we're able to now drive tons of data into people's existing systems that enable them to give that view. Now, that could be simply just a data lake, Power BI style solution, which we fully integrate with and provide them that data, or it flows into a really rigorous asset management system like Techniche.
Just to build on that.
Yeah, I think I mentioned already. I think it starts with people, and I think just wanted to share a couple of things really about our 24/7 driver support center. And I think that we talked about data, and the data that we get, which is quantitative data that we're getting. Now, what we also get is really strong qualitative data as well. We handle over 10,000 calls a month from drivers, and we have a really strong system for taking that information in and looking at what people say at charge points, and then being able to analyze that data. And that gives us a really strong insight to what's actually going on a qualitative basis. And once you start to see that, and you start to see those common themes, and as I said before, I think one of the key things is 80% of all issues are resolved without us having to take any action. It's simply guidance and support for drivers. And that starts with almost like a service design process, really. And we work with one organisation, BV, who are exceptional at this in terms of actually providing brilliant signage and brilliant experience for the customer that then mitigates those at charger issues. In other words, taking out that by having clear instructional signage that gives them that reduces that initial impact and reduces call volumes and improves that experience. But what we're able to also see is that human-driven data is, as I said, gives us that additional insight and says, these are the things that we're seeing commonality that we can draw against that quantitative data as well, and start to say, right, these are areas we can prioritize as key actions for resolution. And that human-driven data really helps us to fundamentally improve the customer experience.
Very good. Well, I think just to add to that and be able to show how Techniche EV could complement the Fuse solution. Typically, maintenance and asset management comes at the very end of the software stack. It's probably the last thing CPOs would think about. They're going to pick a robust charge station management solution first, and then when maintenance requirements are needed, that's typically when we would step in. So Techniche EV, we're a long-standing, incredible asset maintenance management solution that was originally built and still in large operation with forecourt operators. So we know the mobility space really well. We know how drivers interact with assets at mobility hubs. So that's how we've been able to specialize the product specifically for EV and charge point operators. And what makes it unique is the ability to integrate with a charge station management solution like we're doing strategically with Fuse, so that we can automate many of the steps that a charge point operator would have to do manually. So that could be as simple as using OCPI information to automate the asset registry for your sites and for your chargers, to then OCPP to identify issues with chargers, spot error codes and fault states and potentially charger anomalies, to address issues when they happen and hopefully prevent them as well. So our solution in the back end has a data lake of OEM error codes and the remedial actions from that. So when we spot these error codes, we can address it automatically any time of the day. So you're not relying on your network service team to do that. The system will take care of it for you. We'll spot this error code, we'll address it either with an intelligent reset, if that's what the manufacturer suggests that we do, or if it's going to need an on-site call out, we will dispatch it to your maintenance provider with the SLA that you've got agreed. All of this is happening instantaneously, and it kind of builds this continuous feedback loop. So you get a picture of the performance of your estate, the performance of your contractors, the performance of your assets and brands. So you can start to make strategic decisions on which are the right brands and contracts to work with. And all of that means you'll get better reliability as a network provider. You'll free your network service teams from these manual tasks and allow them to address the more human and more complex issues that, Michael, you've just talked about, actually educating drivers. And it's good to have that human connection, because that's how we can actually get to more people and address the issue. So that's why I think the solutions complement each other quite nicely. Just to keep going, Michael, you said the word data earlier on, and it's chargers are probably not very good at telling us what's wrong with them. We know they've got a problem, so it could be a bit of an analogy of an iceberg. So we see on top what we can see, but there's a hell of a lot going on underneath, and with all of that data, we can actually analyze that at scale to actually start to predict some of the things that are going wrong with chargers and address them. So we've got a dashboard example here where we can actually start to unpick some of these undisclosed issues through the data that we're being presented. So we can see things like particularly short sessions, low energy delivered, or low peak power. And these things in isolation on their own might not be that much of a problem. Potentially that could have impacted the customer experience, and that might not be picked up as an error code or anomaly within the charge station management system. But if you can analyze all of this data, we can see when problems are happening that the CPO isn't aware of, and hopefully prevent charges from breaking down, prevent you having unavailability of your assets, so that the customer has a better experience when they turn up. So these are the more complex things that we can solve for. And I guess just from experience over the last couple of years speaking to clients, I'm seeing a lot of CPOs losing time with these manual tasks. So they'll spot an issue in the charge station management system. They might have to go on lunch. They come back and they go, right, okay, error code 100. How do I solve that? What do I need to do? Who's going to maintain this? It's going to need a call out to need to go to a maintenance provider or a warranty provider. All of these things can be automated. And that's what I see CPOs losing the most amount of time with. I mean, Michael, you guys operate chargers on behalf of some of your clients. I mean, is that kind of what you're seeing, and how CPOs can improve for the future?
Yeah, there's a lot to this as well. I mean, obviously, the improved operational performance will obviously drive down your own internal costs as well. So, and making sure that processes are automated, doing things in advance. Come back to some of these in shortly, but things like anomaly detection, spotting points of failure before they arise is going to be absolutely critical. So there's a raft of different areas that we can collectively work on. A few sits in the background and providing that support for CPOs and doing that work, and often in tandem with Techniche, to really go in and see the level of detail and those performance issues and really drive continuous improvement. And I think this is what it's about, really, is that we can't solve all the problems at once. The old analogy, how do you eat an elephant, and it's one bite at a time. It's simply there. And actually, once we start and analyze and understand and prioritize some of these key issues, you can start to drive out those points of failure, and also start to then also at the same time drive up utilization and revenue, and ultimately revenue and margin.
I think just finish this up. What do you think CPOs should be doing now?
Yeah, I mean, CPOs are probably doing some of this already, and this is not, not to underestimate what people's progress is already, but actually having a significant amount of key KPIs and benchmarks as a starting point to where you are. And I've given an example there with contactless decline rates, just a really simple one. So a large CPO moved to us recently, and they were getting decline rates of 17% on their payment terminals. And we looked at it as being an issue where we could see rough benchmarking across payment terminals and all kinds of settings that we have. And obviously that figure for decline rates was very high. And we, within a very short period, we were able to work with the partner to get them to get a common understanding of why that was occurring, and the rationale behind that, and then drive down that decline rate to just less than 8% within a couple of months. And those kind of things just make a real significant difference to obviously revenue, but also to customer experience as well. We're talking about things like roaming session failures, and people are quite surprised actually by the sheer level of failures and the lack of authorization on things like roaming using RFID or app or whatever that might. And I think once those are visible and you're there, then you can really start to address them and then start to segment that data even further. Obvious ones, session failures and 0 kilowatt sessions. There's so many more as well that can be used in these benchmarks to continue to evolve. And I think it's act on the data, not the tickets. We will do the tickets. I mean, that's the reactive part of the experience for the 24/7 driver support side, and from various issues, could be emergency issues that arise. These are critical to resolve at the time. But in the background, what we have to do is be acting on that underpinning data to drive down failure demand. And actually, so what I've said there is in slightly different ways: fix the clock and not the time. We can keep adjusting the clock to tell the right time, but actually let's just fix the clock and get there. So that's really setting clear initiatives focused on high priorities to drive iterative improvement. And there are so many of them, that as a team that we can work on, and in partnership with CPOs to say, how do we continue to improve that experience and choose the best part, software, data platforms. And it isn't just, the quality of that platform in terms of what that platform does, but, it's the quality of the people as well. As I said before, we classic example, we spotted an issue with a firmware update on a rapid charger. It was sending us a very small proportion of what we could call floating data. In other words, it's got decimal points, and it was outside of OCPP requirements. But what that was doing was causing sessions to end really quickly. And we noticed that. We worked with our team, and our team, born in OCPP and all the various issues that are around there with vast amounts of knowledge, we're able to look at that and understand that as being the causality, rather than just simply understanding where that issue was, and then get that, and then work with the charge point manufacturer to get that resolved. So there's mining down into these particular issues is really key, and that really is all about a partnership that enables you to get from to speed that forward.
Well, I think anecdotally, I'm just going to tap into your first point. I mean, I'm in the industry and would class myself as hopefully fairly tech savvy, but contactless decline, it almost happens to me the first time I use a card at a new charger. So I fall foul of it. So it's definitely an issue, and if that can be solved, I'm sure that would improve reliability and perception.
About your maximum bank account and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I think we're kind of at the end of the presentation, Molly.
Brilliant. Yeah. So just before we go to questions that have been put in the chat, I'll give a few people some time to add theirs. I just wanted to clarify, so is it just the charge points that Techniche EV manages?
No, good question. so as our solution has been built off the back of forecourt operators and all the assets around a forecourt, our solution encompasses everything that would support a charger at a charging hub. So if that's going to be one of the kind of big motorway sites where they're dedicated to EV, where they're going to have a shop and food service and other amenities, all of those assets can be maintained within our system. Or if it's just going to be chargers at a parking lot, there might be some barriers, CCTV, lighting, all of those things. If they're not working and they don't have a maintenance process to it, affect the customer experience. So it's very important that they're maintained in a system, and you want it to be a simple solution. So having it all in the same solution that's managing your charges is the best thing. So my long answer basically means yes, you can have any other assets.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up a technician a little bit way here, but I think it's actually from that. It's a really important part of what the story is, really their experience in the classic forecourt world, where big oil majors and those people who've developed, and independents have developed out the forecourt experience over many decades, has got to the point where you attend a classic petrol station forecourt, and the experience is as optimized as possible from the filling of the pump to the retail experience, and it continues to be iterated about what right kind of food and fast food and what kind of things that you need for that particular audience that you're serving. And I think what we're seeing is that transition really from a forecourt, the classic forecourt experience, into the charging experience. And on the road charging and CPOs, there's a huge amount of commonality, and that seems to be driving together to a large degree. Obviously, forecourts, major forecourt players are a big part of the future of EV charging, and the experience that forecourt world brings to EV charging is vast. And I think the other thing is, that kind of key secondary revenue part, the petrol or diesel driver fills up and has to go into the shop and go through the snake of highly priced goods, and comes up to the front and says, pays for their experience, whereas the EV driver pays for it at the charger. So actually, how do we get more people over the forecourt? How do we over the threshold and drive more secondary revenues, and how does it work? And I think that's a key part of the evolution, and I think it's something that the forecourt experience that Technician and others have is huge in terms of where the future within rapid charging particularly lies.
And I think just to pick up on that, I'll just say for forecourts themselves, they've been solving these issues for a long time. Their business model challenged at the moment, because if people are switching to EV, the incentive really for switching to EV is the ability to charge from home. So it's impacting the number of visits for a driver to go to a forecourt. So now they're going to have to go to that forecourt based on the amenities that surround the charger. So it's harder and harder for the forecourt operator to make sure they can still maintain that customer loyalty. To do that, they need a good offer, and they need the offer to be working all the time. So it's super important now to have a maintenance process that's going to address your charges and also address the rest of the assets.
And I think that leads really nicely actually into the most recent question we've had come through about the challenges that CPOs have with connectivity. I don't know if Brad, you want to take that, just on collecting all of this data and improving charger experience requires a reliable connection, and what challenges does that bring up? Yeah,
from my knowledge, connectivity is typically like the second largest problem that a CPO faces with the charge area. Typically it's power first of all, then it's down to network dropout and the connection. Obviously that's a very difficult thing to address, but where we're able to monitor the heartbeat of chargers, or look at the absence of data with a system that's monitoring these things, you can be much more agile to address problems when they occur, so that you're able to get your chargers back up and running as quickly as possible. You may not be able to prevent these issues from ever happening, but as long as you've got a good system in place and processes that is going to resolve issues and point you to where the problems are, then you're going to improve your charger availability. Michael, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, but
yeah, I mean, there are other ways to connect, but the principal one is for connectivity is SIMs, and obviously SIMs can use both the payment terminal and the charger itself to be the point of connectivity. And if they're separate, they may even be on different SIM relationships. So you fundamentally got 2 points of failure from a comms level. The other one with the challenge with SIM cards is it's like insurance. If most people expect SIM cards just to work standard. I think one is that we discovered a couple of examples where the relative strength of the SIM connectivity was slightly different for the charger. In other words, the strength and the quality of the connection had to be really robust, and actually the area while it had connectivity, it wasn't particularly strong, and it almost wavered. So and this kept showing up, and what we used was some network data to be able to try and understand that a little bit more. And actually then the resolution was actually to agree with a network provider to put a localized base station in, which allowed for a significant improvement in the connectivity on the charger. It actually made it, and the charger basically just functioned better. The other one with SIM cards is, I say, you expect them to work, but you only really discover, like insurance, when things stop working and how quickly things come back on. And the expectation that they're multi-network roaming SIMs is only provable when the network goes down for whatever reason. That could be a localized mast, or it could be a national network failure. And we've seen a couple of examples where, in particular, an unnamed CPO, which wasn't one of our clients, there was a national failure on the network, and the expectation was that they would seek out alternatives, but it didn't, and it took out pretty much most of their charging infrastructure for around a day. So the thing is also to test this environment for failure. What would the likely be? What would the likely scenario be? Is there better providers? Is there other people that they can work with to ensure a much more robust connectivity layer, really?
That's really interesting. Thank you both. So I've gone back now to the first question that we had through, which is on grid constraints. So if the ultra rapid hubs are on the rise, how are CPOs able to solve grid constraints?
I guess my view on that is, Michael, let me take a swing, and then I think you probably fill in the gaps for me, as you probably have more experience on this. But I would say from what I've learned and heard about, it's really about influencing government to remove the red tape so that grid connections can be better, so that grid infrastructure can be faster deployed, so that there's less congestion on it. So lobbying is probably the best thing that CPOs can do to help this. But maybe you've got some more knowledge on that, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, these are obviously not necessarily an issue for live charges, although we do have some examples within a non-CPO environment. Obviously, you need a significant amount of load at a site that covers all your requirement. That's a natural part of this, and the change in the UK and the change in the planning laws that have been announced recently will hopefully make a significant difference. Plus, also the removal of or the speeding up of processes for DNOs to process applications. But I mean, everybody knows this is far too slow, and it needs to be significantly improved. The government are taking positive steps, but we can continue to do a lot more. It doesn't necessarily help the live environment. I mean, obviously, what we do for where there's grid constraint is we've got a highly complex dynamic load balancing solution that uses a combination of hardware and software to tackle these issues. And we do have some of those within a public environment where there is a load constraint. So we balance off load from the charger against the connected building and connected supply that it's in the area. And we've now also started to switch that from being just decreasing the charger in response to the charging speed or the charging output, power output. We've also now switched that around, so we keep the charging power output. We do things like adjust heat pumps, or do actually address diminishing load and do things like temperature adjustment within a building that will then allow the chargers to operate at full capacity. And that's particularly important at places with business critical infrastructure. And I suppose CPOs would say it's business critical infrastructure because that's their key revenue. But I'm talking about people like logistics companies, delivery, blue light, etc., where it's absolutely essential that their vehicles are charged effectively. So actually looking at load balancing from both sides of the equation, that you can balance off the other element of supply as well, is really important, and that's something that we've done a huge amount on to make sure that capacity is there.
Molly, I'll just have a look through the questions in the chat there. I saw there was one quite early on from Kelvin. He asked about how do you prevent about cable theft, and I've probably triggered him with that one by mentioning our customer in Nordics that's struggling with it, and John's helped out by providing a link to some options to look at. But from my own experience and what I know operators are doing, it's being able to respond to these things as quickly as possible. So making sure that when cable theft happens, if there is data that's presented by the charger saying the cable's been cut, that can automate a notification and a response so that CCTV can be looked at as quickly as possible, and we can get people on site to address these issues as much as possible. Proactive maintenance to try and stop it as well. So better security, better lit sites with CCTV clearly visible. And I know there are some pretty innovative solutions in place where if you cut the cable now, there's dye that can leak, and much like the cash machine, so you get covered in dye, and then police can identify you in the future and actually put it down to that particular cable cutting incident. So there are some solutions in place now, but as a maintenance provider, I would say it's all about the process and the follow-up to make sure that it's good.
I think the really positive thing about this, and I think it reflects, an evolution in the CPO market, is that CPOs are working together, be that through people like the REA and Recharge UK, Charge UK and other bodies, to try and find and address common solutions that are beneficial to all. It doesn't seem much sense for each CPO to try and go out, work on finding their own solution when it's a full industry problem that we can address. So, the Instavolt have announced this the use of a sleeve which covers over the charging cable, and it's almost impossible to cut through. It's not that it's how it's manufactured, but when I saw Instavolt sharing that, you immediately see other CPOs recognizing that and talking about it in the same thing as such a positive step forward. And I think people working together commonly to solve these industry problems is a really important part of all this, because we know that once this has happened, it's even with best CCTV in the world, you're not necessarily going to be able to address or capture the people who are behind it. What we got to do is just make sure that they're put off fundamentally from ever being in a position to do it. And innovative technology like the ones we're seeing very quickly appear because of that collective working is fantastic for the industry.
I saw a couple of points again in the thread here about cost, and I know this is one of the things that drivers are looking at, and it's for choosing a site and also whether they're going to make the switch to EV. And a couple of things in here. It looks like motorway service sites could be mugging you because the price is so high. How can we lobby governments to reduce VAT by 20%? I think a lot of this boils down to the wholesale cost of energy in the UK is high compared to the continent. If you look at what we saw in the Nordics recently, it's half the price and the price the consumer's paying. So I think this is about lobbying again as a community and coming together to saying that we need to do better as a country and be more energy self-sufficient so that we can bring down the cost. And I guess if we can get more people switching to EV at the right time as deployment happens, profitability increases, and hopefully that we can get the wholesale price of energy down as well. At the moment, it's not good enough for everybody to have a compelling reason to make the switch. So I really hear what you're saying. The wholesale price of energy does need to be cheaper. Mike, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it's more than just that. I mean, the wholesale energy cost is like you say, is the highest in Western Europe and even probably the developed world. And it and that has to come down because that's the base cost. But the other one is fixed charges on electricity pricing. So some of that's been introduced has meant that operationally, the cost of a site before you even begin a charge session is really significant, because those standing charges there are ridiculously high. I think if we're just using it, if it was volume-based pricing and on its own, that would make a huge difference to the industry. There's a ton of other factors that underpin this. You know, things like obviously the cost of implementation, and you know, what other things in terms around planning and other aspects, and what other kind of cost elements can we use to drive down. But fundamentally, your base cost is energy, and optimizing that cost. But you know, fair play to people like Quentin Wilson and many others, and I totally agree with them. You know, CPOs are selling electricity, and yet we, as an industry, well, if you sell electricity anywhere else, it comes at a 5% VAT rate. If a CPO sells it, it's a 20% VAT rate. And I think if overnight the government changed that and found a different way to take that, maybe from the fossil fuel industry as a mechanism to drive it into EV, I think it would make a significant difference for the industry. So VAT is a huge thing we could probably change tomorrow.
And I think if we could help with the profitability of CPOs, allow them on the cost they can control to do better. So if they can get chargers up and available so that more people could be charging every time they pull up to the site, support them with ideas on how to drive halo revenue around those chargers, reduce maintenance costs. At least if we can, by a combination of our solutions, to make them more profitable, at least that can control the controllables, right? Good. Molly, was there any other questions that we could?
We've just had one come through about enabling truck charging at megawatt rates, and perhaps having dedicated facilities for that.
Go on, Michael, you go first.
No, absolutely fascinating area, and it's really going to be interesting to see how quickly. Somebody pointed out there's only 5 EHTVs registered last month, but I think the momentum's actually a lot more powerful than that. I think, you know, some of the really interesting projects that are going on at the moment around, there's about 5 or 6 that Innovate UK are driving at the moment with a development of charging infrastructure, and we're seeing people like Mylance and Aegis and a range of other companies and fleet starting to really significantly invest in infrastructure for EHTV charging. So what's been done? I mean, we've seen some really good examples. So we manage our software powers fundamentally an HTV charging bay in the UK, and we saw very little usage of it for the first few months, and it was the first one in the UK, so we were just interested to see what it was, and all of a sudden we started to get an uptick, and what it was actually a test vehicle coming over from Leeds, driving over the motorways and testing, and then driving back again, and it was great to see that being used. But all of a sudden over the last few months we started to see a significant uptake in HTV charging, and for CPOs it makes a huge difference. I mean, the average session value that we've seen is around £95. So, you know, this is a big uplift on cars, which on a kind of 150 to 300 is around £24 from experience. So you see really high value usage of them, but obviously low volume. But EHTV really is once we see the total cost of ownership model flip, and I think we're already there and people are starting to really understand it, we're going to see a huge amount of investment. The challenges undoubtedly is the size of the vehicle and the ability to access a bay. You can't simply open up a standard charging hub as most currently stand up to an HGV, because there simply isn't the room or the capacity for them. So there's going to have to be a lot of thought into how HGVs are going to charge, either within existing facilities or on new ones as well. And there's a lot of different organisations and companies tackling this. And sorry, just one really last point on that. Really, one is shared depots, and I think it'll be really interesting to see that there's a raft of organisations, both haulage firms and bus depot operators, etc., where they're putting charging facilities in, and those charging facilities are empty during the day. So there's a potential for those facilities to be utilised by other haulage firms or delivery companies for the benefit of their charging, and I think we'll start to see that appearing as a solution for HGVs to charge as well.
Very good.
That seems to be all of the questions we've had in. I'll give it a second for any last minute ones. I wonder, Michael, if you could share any examples of performance or reliability improvements that Fuse has worked with clients on recently that are sort of note or particular relevance to the conversations we've been having.
Yeah, I'm going to give a couple, which was obviously the one about the more than halving decline rates at on payment terminals. I've mentioned the things around firmware as well, but pre-authorization is one of probably the most common issues that we hear through driver support, and there's so much that can be done, and we work closely with multiple providers of not only of the of payment terminals, but the gateway operators, the merchants who sit behind them, to try and look at how that can be changed. And we use various processes, things like overcommit and incremental pre-auth, but there's a variety of other steps as well. So that we've managed to put in place that continually improve contactless payment rates to be as low as possible, and also to relieve the problems about pre-authorization. Pre-authorization is such an issue, but we're able to significantly lower the level of pre-auth, and that results in less driver support issues, less complaint, and it's particularly those drivers who don't necessarily understand that this is we are not taking money from their bank account, that it's simply a hold on their bank, and it's another area where education will play a huge part. So feel free to ask me more, because I could go on forever about pre-authorization, but it's one where all our team are working across, because it has such a detrimental impact, or can have such a detrimental impact on CPOs and the charging experience. So working on that, making sure that the solution is fully optimized, that you just driving up the customer experience and the perception is so important, and a lot of insight on that too, if people want the more details.
Great. I've actually just found one more that we skipped over, which is just what the relationship is between yourselves and how the charge point is optimized. Brad, I think that would lead quite nicely into just an example from you as well about where Techniche EV has been able to step in to help reliability for a CPO.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I think just to wind back a touch. So we've got very complementary solutions. The CPO is going to need to have a charge station management system. If they have an integrated maintenance system like ours connected to that, it means you're going to be able to address issues when problems happen with chargers, and hopefully before problems happen with chargers, by analyzing the data at scale, where we're able to address issues that have happened and make results for customers. The example I want to share, I won't share names, but a CPO in the UK has got 2,500 chargers in operation. We developed a piece of functionality last year where we were able to intelligently reset chargers based on the remedial actions that an OEM would suggest. So if it presents a fault state or an error code that the OEM says it needs to be reset, rather than relying on the network service team to figure that out, find time to do it, go into the CPMS system to initiate a reset, our system can do all of that automatically. So if a charger has a fault in the middle of the night, rather than waiting to 8 o'clock in the morning when the team comes in to do it, it will do all of these steps automatically. And when we did this, within about a week, we delivered plus 4% percentage points increase in charger availability by taking that step away from the service desk, freeing them up, essentially allowing them to speak to customers more often, educate them, and work on more complex tasks. So that's a real world example of how we've been able to optimize charge points and get them available more often. Hopefully that helps.
Great, thank you. So as Michael said, both he and Brad are available to speak to you after this. You can contact either of them or myself with any follow-up questions. And as I said at the beginning, yes, contact details are on the screen there, look. And as I said at the beginning, the webinar will be available on demand, more or less, as soon as the event finishes. I think that's all from me. Did you have any closing remarks?
Grateful to have the platform. So thank you, Solar Media, for helping us out. And Michael, it's wicked to have you on here. I mean, you've got so much more knowledge than I have on pre-authorization. So it was great to have you talking and filling in the gaps for me.
Yeah, just a big thank you to everybody for joining. You know, as a current reader every morning, and you know, for the valuable information it gives, it's a great platform to be able to join. So thank you, Molly, and thank you everybody for coming on. And any of your CPOs, good luck with how continue operations and, you know, the continued growth in your businesses.
Give us a call. We'll surely help, right?
Of course.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Molly.
Cheers.
Thank you,
Right.
Michael.
That's great. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good day, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.